Hello friends, welcome aboard the Sleepy Fairy Tale Express. I'm the Red Mermaid. This train is a dream journey to fairy tale land. Have you all got your train tickets? Subscribe and hit the like button to always be able to ride. Close your eyes, prick up your ears, and listen in a comfortable position. Today's story is Brother Lustig. Once upon a time, a vast battlefield welcomed peace as the war came to an end. Under the brilliantly shining sun, soldiers began their journey home, walking through the devastated fields. Among them was Brother Lustig, a former warrior of the battlefield, now holding a small loaf of bread and 4 silver coins, having received his discharge orders. As his unit disbanded and the footsteps of soldiers kicked up dust in the distance, Lustig felt a cool breeze as he set out on his way. Although his small loaf of bread was hardly enough to satisfy his hunger, he cherished it, holding it close to his heart like a treasure. The 4 coins jingled merrily in his pocket, sounding like a promise of a new beginning. The road ahead seemed endless, but he took each step with determination, heading either home or towards a new encounter. The grass along the roadside swayed in the breeze as if to welcome him, and the clouds in the far sky seemed to quietly accompany him on his journey. On his journey, Brother Lustig encountered an old man dressed in rags. Deep wrinkles etched the old man's face, and his tattered cloak fluttered in the wind, barely covering his frail body. Approaching Lustig with slow steps, the old man's eyes sparkled with both hope and desperation. "Kind young man, please help me," the old man pleaded, extending his hands. His voice cracked, weak as a dried leaf. Lustig looked at him with a heavy heart. He sighed, looking down at his possessions. "Dear beggar, I am but a soldier returned from war, with only this small loaf of bread and a few coins. Once I use them up, I might end up in the same plight as you." His voice was calm. Yet, Lustig's heart was generous. He carefully divided his bread into 4 pieces, giving 1 to the old man. He also took out a small coin from his pocket and placed it in the old man's hand. "This is all I can give. May it aid you a bit on your journey." The old man accepted the bread and coin with deep gratitude, his eyes moistening as he said, "Young man, your generosity will surely move the heavens." Afterward, the old man continued on his way, and Lustig rearranged his remaining bread and coins, resuming his journey. A part of him felt a small comfort knowing his little act of sharing might help another in difficulty. The chilly wind picked up as Lustig hastened along, lost in thought. Soon, another beggar appeared before him. This new figure resembled the first in his poverty-stricken appearance, but had a different face. Lustig did not recognize the similarity. The new beggar approached with a trembling voice of unease. "Kind soul, I beg a bit of aid. I am weary from a long journey, and I need your mercy. His hands shook with hope. Lustig paused, searching through his pockets. He took out the second piece of bread and again divided it, handing it over to the beggar along with a second coin. "This is all I can do. May this small share offer you some comfort." The beggar bowed deeply in thanks, saying, "Your kindness will surely improve the world," and walked away slowly, looking back at Lustig with respect. Lustig watched him go and continued on his path, his heart heavy yet somewhat at peace, hoping his second act of sharing might bring a little hope to another struggling soul. As the day began to darken under a clouded sky, Brother Lustig continued his weary trek. Soon, yet another beggar approached him. This one had a new face, though his expression bore the same marks of poverty and desperation seen in the previous encounters. This beggar, dressed in loose, dirt-stained clothes, approached Lustig and quietly extended his hand, saying, "Traveler, a bit of help, please. I've lost my way and have been wandering for long. I've had nothing to eat for days." Lustig sighed and nodded, pulling out the last piece of bread. He divided it for the third time and handed it over, along with his third coin. "This is nearly all I have left, but if it can ease your hunger even a little, it's enough for me." The beggar looked at Lustig with eyes full of gratitude, saying, "Your heart is as deep as the ocean. This small gift has brought great hope to my life." He sounded truly touched and bowed deeply before slowly walking away. Lustig watched him disappear and continued his journey, feeling a small sense of satisfaction that he had done what he could. Now, as he neared the end of his journey, uncertainty about the future began to take hold, but for the moment, he cherished the present, continuing his way. By evening, feeling the day's fatigue, Lustig finally arrived at a small village. At the center was a cozy inn, its warm lights spilling out invitingly. It felt like a refuge offering rest to travelers. Lustig stepped inside, holding onto his last piece of bread and coin. The inn's atmosphere was warm and welcoming. The innkeeper greeted him with a friendly smile, asking, "Welcome, traveler. What can I do for you?" His voice was gentle and inviting. Lustig replied quietly, pulling out his last piece of bread, "I'll eat this bread, but please, a drink for this one coin. It's been a long day." He sat at a table, slowly chewing his bread, each bite helping him relax a little more. The innkeeper brought him a beer as requested, placing a frothy mug in front of him. The aroma was rich, almost overflowing. Lustig took a deep breath and sipped the beer slowly, feeling his fatigue wash away with each gulp. Leaving the inn, Lustig resumed his journey. In the dim evening light, he met a person who appeared to be a veteran soldier like himself, dressed in a dust-covered uniform, his face marked by the weariness of the road. "Hello, comrade, could you spare a piece of bread and a coin for a drink?" the soldier asked, his voice carrying a hopeful tone. Lustig stopped and shook his head. Where would I find it? His voice sounded tired. Since my discharge, I've had nothing but a loaf of bread and 4 coins. I met 3 beggars on the road and gave each a quarter of my bread and a coin, and I ate the last quarter at an inn and drank with my last coin. My pockets are empty now, and if you have nothing, we might have to beg together. Seeing Lustig's hesitation, the soldier who was disguised as Saint Peter reassured him. Don't worry, comrade. My medical knowledge can help us. Together, we can quickly earn the money we need. Lustig, feeling a spark of hope from these words, finally decided. Really? Then I hope I can be of some help. Let's go together. His voice gained strength as he spoke. Saint Peter smiled and patted Lustig on the back, saying, Yes, let's stick together. If I make any money, I'll give you half. I'll do my best to ensure our journey isn't too hard. As Lustig and Saint Peter walked, they led them to a quiet rural area. As the sun began to set, they stumbled upon a small farmhouse from which loud cries could be heard, drawing their immediate attention. Curious about the commotion, they cautiously approached the house. Inside, the cries were even louder. Entering, they saw a woman weeping loudly, her husband appearing gravely ill and motionless on the floor, his face twisted in pain while his wife clutched his hand, sobbing. As the night deepened, the air around the sick man grew tenser. Amid the continuous crying and the heavy silence of the farmhouse, Saint Peter spoke with authority. Stop your wailing and crying. I will heal this man. As soon as he finished speaking, Saint Peter took out a small vial from his pocket. It contained a special ointment he had prepared during his travels. He carefully opened the vial and applied the ointment to the man's forehead and chest. Upon contact, a mystical scent filled the room. Minutes later, something remarkable happened. The man's complexion began to return to normal, and his breathing became steady. His wife, tears streaming down her face in disbelief, watched as her husband gradually regained his strength. After a while, the husband slowly opened his eyes and began to move. Initially confused, he slowly realized his body felt different. He sighed deeply and managed to sit up completely. As the husband miraculously recovered, he and his wife were filled with joy and gratitude. They surrounded Saint Peter, expressing their thanks and asking how they could repay him, offering him anything within their power. However, Saint Peter declined their offers with a gentle, humble voice. No, I did not do this for reward, so I cannot accept your offers. The fact that he has regained his health is reward enough for me. Despite their insistent offers, he continued to refuse. Touched by his humility and mercy, the farm couple were even more impressed. They invited him to stay permanently, assuring him their home could be his whenever he chose. St. Peter, while grateful for their warmth, insisted he must continue his journey. "Thank you deeply for your kindness, but I have further to travel and more people to help. I cannot stay." Brother Lustig, feeling impatience at St. Peter's continuous refusals, nudged him sharply. "Accept something, we truly need it. Your help has been significant, and it is right to accept their gesture of gratitude." His voice mixed urgency with sincerity. At that moment, the farmer's wife brought out a small lamb, its eyes innocent and its young wool softly shimmering. She offered the lamb to St. Peter, saying, "Please take this lamb. There is no greater gift for us than the healing you've given. May this small creature convey our heartfelt thanks." St. Peter looked at the lamb, hesitating momentarily, but seeing the earnestness in Lustig's eyes and the couple's desperate expressions, he finally relented. "Very well, I will accept this lamb, hoping it deepens our bond." His voice was gentle and warm. St. Peter agreed to accept the lamb but refused to carry it himself. With a playful poke, Brother Lustig teased him once more. "Take it, you fool, we really need it." His voice was mixed with playful complaint. Finally, St. Peter responded with a smile, "All right, I will take the lamb, but I won't carry it. If you want it, you must carry it yourself." His words were half joking, half serious. Brother Lustig agreed cheerfully. "That's fine, I can carry it easily," he said as he hoisted the lamb onto his shoulders. The lamb was light and showed a gentle demeanor as it settled comfortably on his shoulder. Together, they continued their journey with the lamb. Brother Lustig found the task of carrying the lamb not burdensome, but rather comforting. The soft wool and warm body of the lamb provided solace throughout the long journey. St. Peter watched Brother Lustig's lively demeanor and smiled. The path through the forest was shaded and quiet. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating small patches of light on the ground as St. Peter and Brother Lustig led the lamb along. However, the long journey gradually made Brother Lustig feel hungry, and the lamb began to feel heavy. Looking around, Brother Lustig spotted a suitable spot and suggested to St. Peter, "Look, there's a good place over there. We could cook and eat our lamb." His voice was filled with excitement and anticipation. St. Peter appeared to ponder the suggestion momentarily, but agreed to it. "All right," he responded, "but I can't cook. If you will do the cooking, there's a kettle over there." Brother Lustig immediately sprang into action. He carefully prepared the lamb, gathered some branches nearby, and started a fire. He then placed the kettle over the fire and began to cook the lamb's meat meticulously. The quiet of the forest was filled with the sound of sizzling and the aromatic scent of cooking meat. St. Peter quietly observed the process, occasionally adjusting the fire or checking on the meat as Brother Lustig cooked. When St. Peter decided to take a walk, Brother Lustig continued preparing the meal on his own. "Go ahead, I'll handle the cooking," he said confidently. St. Peter expressed his gratitude and walked into the forest. Lustig stoked the fire, which blazed energetically, and carefully prepared the meat. He filled the pot with water, added the finely chopped meat, and began to boil it. The air around the campfire soon filled with the savory aroma of the cooking meat. As Lustig waited for St. Peter's return, he tended to the cooking, stirring the meat occasionally and adjusting the seasonings to taste. The meat softened as it cooked. Lustig waited until the lamb meat was fully cooked. Expecting St. Peter's return, he occasionally checked the meat and scanned the surroundings. However, St. Peter was nowhere to be seen. Eventually, the food was ready, and Lustig decided to begin eating without him. He carefully cut the cooked meat, and while slicing, he discovered the lamb's heart, known for being especially tender and nutritious. Lustig looked at the heart and commented, "They say this is the best part." Curious, he took a piece and tasted it. The flavor was far more delicious than he expected, melting in his mouth. Unable to resist, Lustig ended up eating the entire heart. When St. Peter returned, he said, "You can eat the whole lamb if you want. I just need the heart. Please give it to me." His voice was peaceful but carried an undertone of probing truth. Lustig felt a rush of tension. He pretended to search through the lamb meat with a knife and fork, fully aware the heart was no longer there. His movements were nervous and clumsy, his mind increasingly weighed down. Finally, Lustig admitted defeat, saying, "It's not here," his voice filled with disappointment and worry, unable to meet St. Peter's gaze. St. Peter appeared momentarily surprised by Brother Lustig's words. "Then where is it?" he asked again. Lustig, looking flustered, responded, "I don't know," and quickly added, trying to defuse the situation, "But look, how foolish we both are, searching for a lamb's heart when we forgot that a lamb doesn't have one." St. Peter paused, then nodded, saying, "Oh, that's news to me. Every animal has a heart, but a lamb doesn't?" His voice mixed astonishment with skepticism. As Lustig's lie became apparent, St. Peter responded intriguingly, "No, be sure, my brother, a lamb does not have a heart. Think seriously, and you will see it doesn't." His voice was ironic and carried a smile. St. Peter decided to lighten the mood. "All right," he replied, "if it has no heart, I don't want the lamb, you eat it alone." Lustig, relieved by St. Peter's leniency, added the remaining half of the lamb meat to his backpack. "What I can't eat now, I'll take with me," he said, acting quickly. The rest of the lamb meat was securely packed in his backpack. Continuing their journey, Brother Lustig and St. Peter reached a deep, wide stream that was their next barrier to cross. St. Peter looked at the water's depth and suggested Lustig go first. "Go ahead." But Lustig, wary of the water's depth, refused, saying no, planning to stay behind if it became too deep, potentially avoiding danger. St. Peter ignored his concerns and bravely entered the water, which only reached his knees. Seeing this, Lustig gathered his courage and slowly stepped into the water. However, as he walked, the water deepened significantly, soon reaching his neck. Anxiety and fear enveloped him, and the current seemed to grow stronger. The situation in the dangerous waterway escalated quickly. As the water rose to his mouth, Lustig cried out in desperation, "Brother, help me." His voice trembled with fear. St. Peter, testing his sincerity, said, "Confess that you ate the lamb's heart, and I will help you." Despite the rising water, Lustig stubbornly denied it. "No, I didn't eat it." Despite his response, the water continued to rise. Once again, St. Peter posed the same question, "Confess that you ate the lamb's heart, and I will help you." Lustig's situation grew more desperate, but he repeated the same denial, "No, I didn't eat it." Finally, St. Peter accepted Lustig's stubbornness and decided to rescue him. Using a mystical power, he calmed the water. As the water gradually receded, Lustig, breathing a sigh of relief, emerged from the water. Crossing vast open fields and winding through countless small villages and endless green forests, they finally arrived at the grand gates of a kingdom. The air was thick with excitement, and a large flag fluttered above the gate, seemingly welcoming them. There, they encountered astonishing news. The king's beautiful daughter had succumbed to a deadly illness. Whispers filled with worry and sorrow could be heard around every corner of the castle. Seizing the moment, Brother Lustig tapped St. Peter on the shoulder and exclaimed, "This is it, brother. An opportunity has arisen for us. If we can heal her, we might be cared for life." "Come now, hurry your steps, dear brother, let us not be late," Lustig urged, his voice desperate but his body lagging behind as the shadows stretched long on the path. The sunlight filtering through the leaves cast a serene glow on his wrinkled face and graying beard. Lustig grabbed St. Peter's arm, trying to propel him forward. His eyes filled with concern, and sweat beads on his forehead glistened in the sunlight. "St. Peter, please, a bit more strength. We must do this. His voice sounded encouraging. Unfortunately, by the time they reached the castle where the princess resided, they were met by a guard with a somber face. "I am sorry, sirs, but the princess has already passed away," the guard informed them in a low, mournful tone. Peter and Lustig looked at each other, drowned in silence, their journey feeling futile as the massive doors of the castle seemed heavier than ever. On a sunny day under the vast shadow of the royal palace, Brother Lustig and St. Peter stood facing each other. Lustig's face was filled with anger, but St. Peter maintained a calm and solemn demeanor. "It's over for us," Lustig shouted, his voice trembling with tension and disappointment. "It's all because of your slow pace." He waved his hand accusingly at St. Peter. "Be quiet," St. Peter responded gently. His voice was soothing and reassuring. "I can do more than heal the sick, I can also bring back the dead." His words carried deep confidence and boundless capability. "If you truly can do that," Lustig eyed him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, "fine, but make sure it earns us at least half the kingdom." His words were greedy, yet they contained a hint of negotiation. Following this, they passed through the high doors of the royal palace. The interior was adorned with lavish decorations and precious jewels, yet every face was shadowed with grief. St. Peter approached the king confidently, promising that he could revive his daughter. His voice cast a ray of hope, filling the surrounding air with anticipation. In the quiet room of the palace, St. Peter approached the side of the deceased princess with a gentle and serious demeanor. "Bring a kettle filled with water," he requested, and soon a servant brought in a golden, shimmering kettle adorned with palace jewels, the water inside sparkling. St. Peter looked around and commanded everyone to leave the room. As the room emptied, a solemn silence settled. Only Brother Lustig remained to observe his actions. St. Peter then began to carefully sever the limbs of the princess. His movements were skilled and precise. He placed the severed limbs in a large cauldron and lit a fire underneath, causing the flames to dance in shades of blue and orange, heating the water to a boil. As the flesh began to separate from the bones, St. Peter used tongs to carefully extract the white bones, placing them in an orderly fashion on a table. Each bone was meticulously cleaned, and a mysterious order was apparent on the table. Lustig watched the entire process with a sense of awe and reverence. In the tense silence of the royal palace, St. Peter stood up slowly. His face was set with a resolute expression. He approached the princess and, taking a deep breath, began to chant, "In the name of the Holy Trinity, rise, Maiden of Death." His voice echoed, making the air tremble around him. He repeated the incantation 3 times. At the completion of the third invocation, a miracle unfolded. The princess slowly opened her eyes, her gaze bright with new life. She rose, healthy and beautiful, her cheeks blushing like roses, her eyes sparkling with hope and joy. The king, witnessing this scene, wept with joy and rushed to express his gratitude to Saint Peter. "Ask for your reward, even half of my kingdom is yours," the king said, his voice shaking with emotion and his eyes filled with gratitude. However, Saint Peter humbly shook his head. "I desire nothing," he quietly responded. He was there merely to help, without expecting any reward. As the bright sunlight streamed through the windows of the royal palace, clusters of golden light scattered across the room. In this special moment, Brother Lustig muttered to himself in a voice mixed with disappointment and annoyance, "Oh, you fool!" He playfully jabbed Saint Peter in the ribs. His touch was light, but his voice was filled with sarcasm and dissatisfaction. "Don't act so foolishly. You may not need it, but I do." Despite these words, Saint Peter maintained a peaceful expression. He was well aware of Lustig's greed, but did not criticize him. However, the king was observing the entire situation and noticed Lustig's desire. The king's gaze turned towards Lustig, and he promptly gave an order to his treasurer. "Fill his backpack with gold," the king commanded clearly. The treasurer obeyed the king's order, filling pouches with pure gold and placing them in Lustig's backpack. The backpack grew heavier with gold, and a glint of greed began to form in Lustig's eyes. Quietly walking along the road, Saint Peter and Brother Lustig entered a verdant forest. The trees soared high, and birdsong filled the tranquil air. Fresh air and sunlight peeked through the branches, lighting their path. Saint Peter began to remove the gold nuggets from the backpack, methodically dividing them into 3 neat piles. His actions were precise and fair. One pile, then another, and finally the last, all were equally sized. Lustig watched in confusion, his eyebrows furrowed in bewilderment. "What madness is this? There are only the 2 of us, yet you make 3 shares." Lustig thought to himself, his voice filled with doubt and discontent. Saint Peter calmly answered his unspoken question, "I have divided it accurately, 1 for me, 1 for you, and 1 for the person who ate the sheep's heart." Breaking the tranquil silence of the blue forest, Lustig suddenly said, "Oh, that was me." His voice mixed surprise and assertiveness. He hurriedly scooped the gold nuggets designated as his share into his backpack. His movements were hasty and anxious. "But how can that be true, Brother Peter?" Saint Peter asked with a skeptical look. "Sheep have hearts, just like other animals. Why wouldn't a sheep have one?" "Ah, what are you thinking, dear brother? Of course, sheep have hearts. Why would they be any different?" Lustig responded quickly and firmly. His face was marked with confusion and a touch of boldness. "If that is so, take the gold," St. Peter said with a heavy heart. "But from now on, I shall no longer accompany you, I must follow my own path." His voice was laden with sadness and disappointment. A look of sorrow lingered in his eyes. "As you wish, dear brother," Lustig replied, his voice unable to hide his regret and guilt. "Farewell." As his words concluded, the two parted ways. The forest path led them in different directions, and thus they separated. As St. Peter quietly disappeared along the forest path, Brother Lustig found himself alone. His heart was initially filled with freedom and joy, but soon that joy turned into anxiety. "It's good that he has left. He was certainly a strange saint," he muttered to himself, absorbed in his own thoughts and finding St. Peter odd. Carrying a backpack full of gold, Lustig walked, but his mind was in turmoil, unsure of how to use the gold properly. Although he possessed a great deal of money, he lacked the knowledge to manage it wisely. In the city's markets and inns, he squandered his money lavishly. The gold coins seemed to continuously slip through his fingers like water. He indulged in luxurious foods, bought expensive clothes, and held festival-like parties every night. Each night was a grand celebration, and Lustig enjoyed spending handfuls of gold coins. However, his extravagant lifestyle was not sustainable. Eventually, his backpack was empty. When the last gold coin was spent, Lustig realized he had nothing left. None of the friends or companions who had joined him during the parties remained. Surrounded by loneliness and regret, he deeply reflected on his greed and recklessness, fiddling with his empty pockets. Brother Lustig, having squandered all his wealth, found himself wandering and lost, passing through various countries. His clothes became worn and dirty, and his face bore the look of exhaustion. One day, he arrived near a palace in an unknown small country. There, he overheard townspeople discussing the death of the king's daughter. At that moment, his eyes sparkled with an opportunity. "Ah, ha! This might be a good chance for me," Lustig thought to himself, filled with excitement about another opportunity. He remembered the times he had spent with St. Peter and tried to recall the miraculous spell vaguely. Without hesitation, he approached the palace. As he passed through the palace gates, he straightened his attire, trying to appear confident and dignified. Standing before the king, Lustig raised his voice confidently. "Your Majesty, I have heard that your precious daughter has passed away. However, I possess a unique ability. I can bring the dead back to life. If you grant me the opportunity to revive your daughter, I ask that you reward me appropriately." The king considered Brother Lustig's offer seriously, but was initially skeptical of trusting him completely. So, he consulted with his advisors and inner circle, who had heard rumors of a discredited soldier roaming around, reviving the dead. Some advisors speculated that Lustig might be that person. "Since my daughter has already passed, it's worth a try," the council cautiously suggested. Convinced by their counsel, the king agreed to give Lustig a chance. Lustig was clear about his demands. "Bring me a kettle filled with water," he commanded, and the palace servants quickly complied. He then asked everyone to leave the room, ensuring it was empty. Like St. Peter, he carefully began to sever the limbs of the princess, placing the pieces into the large kettle filled with water. He lit a fire, and the water began to boil. Silence and tension filled the room as the limbs gradually dissolved, separating flesh from bone. Lustig, remembering the spell used by St. Peter, fervently hoped the same miracle would occur. His hands trembled as he slowly extracted the bones from the water and began to arrange them on a table. The room was heavy with tension, the only sounds being the bubbling of boiling water and Lustig's anxious breaths. He carefully extracted the bones from the large pot, laying them out on the table. However, unlike St. Peter, he lacked the knowledge to arrange them in the correct order. His hands shook as he incorrectly placed the bones, resulting in a disordered array on the table. Lustig took a deep breath and loudly recited the incantation he remembered. "In the most holy name of the Trinity, dead maiden, arise." His voice was desperate yet fearful. He repeated the chant 3 times, but the bones remained still. His eyes widened with disappointment and fear. He repeated the chant 3 more times, each call louder and more urgent. "In the most holy name of the Trinity, dead maiden, arise." However, the bones still did not move, and the spell had no effect. Despair filled Lustig's voice as he exclaimed, "Damn it, you poor woman, arise." His voice escalated with each plea, his last resort of hope. He looked towards the scattered bones with a mix of anger and despair. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The window slid open silently, revealing a figure at the window. It was St. Peter. His presence seemed to radiate peace and calmness. He gracefully entered the room through the window, addressing Lustig with a calm voice. St. Peter's voice resonated solemnly. "O man who does not know God, what are you doing? How can the dead maiden arise if you have scattered the bones so carelessly?" His words carried a force that awakened the truth, and Lustig realized how inappropriate his actions had been. Lustig clasped his hands and bowed his head. "Dear brother, I did my best," he pleaded. St. Peter looked at Lustig for a moment, his eyes conveying forgiveness and mercy. "I will save you from your predicament this time," he continued, "but know that if you attempt such a thing again, it will only get worse. Also, you must not ask or accept anything from the king for this deed." His words were clear and firm. Saint Peter began to calmly and courteously tidy up the room. He carefully picked up the scattered bones one by one, arranging them in the correct order. His touch was that of a professional, precise and meticulous, and as each bone found its place, the arrangement looked like a perfectly assembled puzzle. After a while, Saint Peter stepped back and quietly prayed 3 times, "In the name of the most holy Trinity, arise, dead maiden." His voice was filled with faith and power, and each word filled the room with a divine light. As soon as the 3rd prayer was completed, the king's daughter opened her eyes and was revived, healthy and beautiful once again. The room held its breath during this miraculous moment, filled with awe. Saint Peter quietly finished his work and then exited through the window. His departure was as natural as a gentle breeze, and the only trace he left behind was one of gratitude and the miracle of healing. Meanwhile, Brother Lustig sighed in relief that everything had ended well, yet he was also angry at the realization that he ultimately would receive nothing. Gratitude and anger intermingled within him, creating a whirlwind of complex emotions. He quietly reflected on the situation in the room, pondering his next actions. In this complex moment, his emotions fluctuated between calm and anger, reflecting the inner turmoil he experienced in the face of such profound events. Brother Lustig was consumed by a tangle of emotions, sitting alone, deep in thought. His mind was overwhelmed with anger and disappointment as he lamented his situation. What could possibly be going through that man's mind? Giving with one hand and taking away with the other, it just doesn't make sense. His voice quivered with confusion and rage, and his eyes were deeply etched with disillusionment. However, the king held great gratitude towards Lustig and was prepared to offer him anything he desired. The king approached him and said, "Whatever you wish for, just say it. I am grateful for your bravery and your skills." Although the king's voice was filled with genuine gratitude and respect, Lustig could not hide his discomfort upon hearing these words. Cunningly, Lustig decided to take advantage of the king's offer. He carefully said to the king, "Then, would you please fill my backpack with gold? That is all I desire." His tone was gentle, yet it concealed a calculated slyness. Without hesitation, the king ordered it so, and Lustig's backpack was filled with gold. Lustig accepted the gold and then left the king and his court. Saint Peter stood quietly at the gate. His eyes seemed calm, but deep disappointment lingered within. As Lustig walked through the gate, Saint Peter sighed, "You are quite a sight, having been told to take nothing, yet your backpack is full of gold." His voice was soft, but carried a hint of warning. Lustig shrugged and replied, "I couldn't help it. They just kept putting it in." There was a tone of excuse mixed with a hint of anxiety in his voice. St. Peter solemnly said, "Listen well, if you do this again, you will suffer." His warning was clear, and his gaze was serious. Lustig, calming a bit of his excitement, said, "Don't worry, brother, now that I have money, why would I trouble myself with scrubbing bones?" St. Peter sighed and closed his eyes. Unbelievable. How long will that gold last? He knew he could no longer persuade Lustig. After a moment of contemplation, he finally said, "To ensure you do not tread the forbidden path again, I will grant your backpack the ability to hold whatever you desire within it." His words felt magical, and a faint light flashed from the backpack. With those words, "Farewell, you will never see me again," St. Peter disappeared. Lustig stood alone for a moment, then looked down at his backpack. Brother Lustig bid farewell to the spot where St. Peter had vanished. "Goodbye," he said, his voice light, but deep inside, he was filled with unease and turmoil. He murmured to himself, "I'm glad that strange man is gone, I will never follow him." His words carried a sense of relief and a firm decision. However, he no longer thought about the magical power of his backpack. As he walked on, his mind was busy with other thoughts like how he would spend the money and where he might travel, but the idea of the magical backpack given by St. Peter slowly faded from his memory. Brother Lustig continued his reckless life, squandering his money lavishly. One day, when his funds were nearly depleted, he passed by a small inn and thought, "Money is meant to be spent," his voice mixing anxiety and determination. He entered the inn and ordered wine for 3 coins and bread for 1 coin. The atmosphere in the inn was lively and cheerful. Lustig sat at a corner table and began to drink his wine. His spirits lifted slightly with the sweet aroma of the wine. Soon, however, another scent tantalized his nose, the enticing smell of roasted goose. Brother Lustig took a deep breath and looked around. He saw the innkeeper pulling 2 golden-browned geese from the oven. His eyes were drawn to the tempting sight of the goose, and he felt his stomach growl with hunger. However, having spent all his money, he had none left. In a moment of inspiration, Brother Lustig remembered the magic bestowed upon his backpack by St. Peter. Excited, he decided, "Oh ho! I should try for a goose." His voice was a mix of exhilaration and curiosity. He stood up and walked outside the inn. At the door of the inn, he pointed at his backpack and shouted, "I want those 2 roasted geese in the oven to be in my backpack." Quietly, he untied the backpack strings. Instantly, the magic activated. As he opened the backpack, miraculously, 2 perfectly roasted geese appeared inside. He was amazed as he looked at the geese in the backpack, hot and fragrant as if just taken out of the oven. Lustig took the geese from the backpack and walked back into the inn. Thanks to the magic backpack, Brother Lustig obtained the roasted geese and was elated. Ah, fortunate indeed! Now I am a successful man. He felt as if he could soar with happiness. Deciding to enjoy this fortune in solitude, he went to a meadow where he comfortably began to eat the roasted meat. While he was eating, 2 traveling engineers approached him. Their eyes were filled with hunger, and they seemed to covet the second goose Lustig had brought. Sensing their gaze, Lustig paused for a moment and thought, "One is enough for me." He waved at them kindly and said, "Take the goose and eat it." The 2 men gratefully accepted his offer and returned to the inn. Upon reaching there, they ordered half a bottle of wine and some bread. They started to eat the meal provided along with the goose they had received. I'll continue with the rest of the chapters. Let me know if you need any specific details or adjustments. Inside the bustling inn, the innkeeper's wife was busy working when she noticed the 2 traveling engineers eating the goose. Her gaze turned suspicious, and she whispered to her husband, "Those 2 are eating a goose. Check our oven, it might be ours." The innkeeper reacted immediately and hurried to the kitchen to check the oven. His heart was filled with concern. Upon opening the oven door, just as he feared, it was empty. When he had last checked, 2 geese were roasting inside, but now there was nothing left. Confused and alarmed, the innkeeper realized that the goose being eaten by the 2 engineers was indeed the same goose that had disappeared from his inn. He approached them with swift and determined steps, asking directly, "Where did you get that goose?" The engineers looked at each other, momentarily flustered. They explained how they received the goose, mentioning Brother Lustig's story. The innkeeper, filled with rage, exclaimed loudly in front of the other guests, "What? You think you can eat a goose so cheaply? Pay up right now, or I'll give you a thrashing with the green cudgel." His voice was furious, and the other guests in the inn turned to look at the scene in surprise. The engineers, startled, quickly tried to explain themselves. "We're not thieves, a retired soldier gave it to us outside in the meadow." Their voices were desperate. The innkeeper was not convinced by their excuse. "You can't fool me with that trick. That soldier was here, but he left empty-handed. I saw it myself. You're thieves and need to pay." He was adamant as he pushed them, and the atmosphere in the inn grew tense. The 2 men opened their wallets, but they had almost no money left. Seeing this, the innkeeper grew even angrier, grabbed a stick, and threatened them. He chased them out of the inn, and the two left, feeling wronged. Brother Lustig continued his journey toward a grand castle. Arriving there, he felt thirsty and weary and decided to enter the most humble-looking inn in the area for a night's stay. The inn was small and simple, but it looked warm and comforting to his eyes. However, the innkeeper shook his head at Lustig. "No more rooms. The house is full of noble guests." His voice was more firm than apologetic. Brother Lustig looked around, puzzled. "It's strange that they come here instead of staying at that grand castle," he remarked. His words were a mix of curiosity and slight suspicion. The innkeeper hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly, "Well, it's not that simple to spend a night there. No one who has tried has come out alive." His voice was low and serious. Brother Lustig was taken aback by this revelation. A curiosity about the castle grew inside him. He left the inn and walked towards the grand castle. The high towers and dark shadows of the castle greeted him, and he stood at the threshold, determined to uncover its secrets. Brother Lustig stood before the grand castle's gates. The atmosphere was mysterious and eerie. Stories about the place had made him hesitate, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He lifted his head and declared boldly, "If others have tried, so will I." The innkeeper, seeing his resolve, tried to dissuade him with a worried expression. "Please reconsider, you might lose your life." His voice carried genuine concern. Brother Lustig dismissed the innkeeper's warning lightly. "I won't die just like that," he replied confidently. His eyes were determined, and deep inside, he was convinced of his success. "Bring me the key and some good food and wine." The innkeeper listened to Lustig's request and, after a moment's hesitation, respected his resolve. He handed over the key and prepared a package of food and wine for Lustig. His hands trembled, but Lustig firmly thanked him. Brother Lustig took the supplies and headed to the castle. His steps were heavy but resolute. He reached the grand doors of the castle, took a deep breath, and used the key to unlock them. The doors slowly opened, and he stepped inside. Inside the castle, the air was musty and damp, but Brother Lustig did not lose his courage. Using the key provided by the innkeeper, he passed through the dark halls and entered a large room that appeared unused for many years, covered in dust, with no furniture visible. Brother Lustig spread out the food and wine prepared by the innkeeper and quietly enjoyed his meal. After eating, he laid out his sleeping bag on the floor since there was no bed. The cold stone floor of the castle would be his bed for the night. His body was weary from the journey, and he soon fell into a deep sleep. However, in the middle of the night, a loud noise startled Lustig awake. As his eyes adjusted, he witnessed a terrifying sight. 9 grotesque demons were circling around him, dancing wildly. Their appearances were chilling, each one bizarre in shape and size. The demons seemed to notice his presence and began whispering and laughing among themselves. Their dance grew more intense, and their laughter filled the room. Brother Lustig, frozen in fear for a moment, soon gathered his courage, stood his ground, and faced them head-on. He took deep breaths and summoned all his courage and faith to endure this frightening ordeal. Brother Lustig attempted to communicate calmly with the dancing demons during their wild dance. "All right, dance if you must, but no one comes too close." His voice was firm, but the demons ignored his warnings and continued to approach, nearly stepping on his face. Lustig felt a surge of fear and again warned, "Stop, you fiends of demons." But the demons' behavior became even more aggressive, and their laughter turned more sinister. Finally, losing his patience, Brother Lustig shouted, "Stop! I'll soon show you how to be quiet." In a burst of anger, he grabbed a wooden chair from a corner of the room and began swinging it like a weapon. He swung the chair leg violently towards the center of the demons, but the 9 demons, facing only one man, maintained their upper hand. Brother Lustig's voice rang out with anger and determination. "Demons, this is too much. But wait a moment. Into my backpack, all 9 of you." As he commanded, the magical backpack granted by St. Peter unleashed its astonishing power. Instantly, upon hearing his command, the 9 demons were sucked into the backpack one by one, drawn by a powerful force. Brother Lustig quickly closed the backpack and tied it tightly, ensuring the demons could not escape. He then threw the backpack into a corner of the room. Once he had finished, the room became instantly quiet. The demons' noise and laughter disappeared, and peace was restored to the place. Brother Lustig relaxed and returned to his makeshift bed to lie down. Though his body and mind were exhausted, he finally fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. As the morning sun shone through the windows, Brother Lustig awoke. The events of the night felt like a dream, but seeing the backpack in the corner, he realized it all had truly happened. He felt a profound sense of relief as he greeted the new day. At dawn, the innkeeper and the noble who owned the castle came looking for Brother Lustig. They had heard about the previous night's events and were curious to see how he had fared. When they arrived at the castle and found Lustig still jovial and healthy, they were astonished. The noble, unable to hide his amazement, asked, "Did the spirits not harm you?" It was well known that no one had ever survived a night in the castle. Brother Lustig smiled confidently and responded, They didn't harm me because," he paused to ensure they were all listening, "all 9 of them are inside my backpack." His voice was filled with pride, and he pointed at the backpack to prove his point. The innkeeper and the noble looked at each other, their expressions transforming from anxiety to awe. Though Brother Lustig did not open the backpack to show them, his story and his relaxed demeanor convinced them. At that moment, the noble expressed his admiration for Brother Lustig. "You are the first person to spend a night here and return alive. This is a remarkable feat. You have brought great courage and wisdom to our town." He then offered him a reward. The noble expressed his deep gratitude for Brother Lustig's courage and wisdom by inviting him to live within the castle. "You can now live peacefully in your castle. They will no longer haunt it," his voice filled with relief and joy. The noble also offered him lavish gifts and earnestly requested that Brother Lustig remain as part of his staff, promising to take care of him for life. However, Brother Lustig had other ideas. "No," he replied politely, "I am accustomed to wandering, and I will continue traveling farther." His voice was filled with hope and excitement for the future. Brother Lustig had experienced much, and those experiences were drawing him to explore more of the world. The noble respected his decision and nodded understandingly. They wished Brother Lustig a safe journey wherever he might go, blessing his travels. After exchanging warm farewells with the noble, Brother Lustig packed the gifts in his backpack and left the castle. After leaving the noble's castle, Brother Lustig headed towards a blacksmith's forge in a nearby village. He still harbored concerns about the demons inside his backpack and sought to resolve this issue completely. Upon arriving at the forge, he met the blacksmith and his apprentices and explained the situation with his backpack. Brother Lustig placed the backpack on the anvil and asked the blacksmith to thoroughly deal with the 9 demons inside. Initially surprised, the blacksmith and his apprentices, after listening to Lustig's explanation, steeled themselves for the task. They took up large hammers and struck the backpack with all their might, each blow eliciting screams of agony from the demons. After the hammering subsided and the forge fell silent, Brother Lustig carefully opened the backpack to check inside. 8 of the demons were indeed dead. However, astonishingly, one was still alive and had hidden in a corner of the backpack. This demon managed to escape the attention of Brother Lustig and the blacksmiths, swiftly fleeing back to hell. As the years passed, Brother Lustig continued to explore the world, gaining wisdom and experience. His adventures became legendary, and his stories spread far and wide among the people. However, as time went on, he grew weary of the constant travels and adventures, and his desire for inner peace grew stronger. Eventually, Brother Lustig decided to prepare for his final days and sought out a hermit known for his piety. He arrived at the peaceful and secluded place where the hermit lived, his face showing the marks of his long journeys, but his eyes still sparkled with clarity. Brother Lustig confessed to the hermit, "I am tired of wandering, and now I wish to act in a manner that would allow me entrance into heaven." His voice was earnest, and his statement carried a deep longing for spiritual reflection and change. The hermit, deeply thoughtful upon hearing Lustig's confession, pointed out two paths. "There are two paths here," he explained, "one wide and seemingly pleasant leading to hell, and the other narrow and arduous leading to heaven." The hermit's words were clear, but Brother Lustig viewed this choice with a different perspective. "I am no fool," he thought to himself. "Why would I take the harder path?" Trusting the wisdom and experience gained from his past travels, he chose the wide and pleasant path, filled with appealing landscapes and pleasures. However, as he walked this path, a sense of unease remained in his heart. Eventually, he reached a large, ominous gate that the shadows and foreboding atmosphere around it indicated led to hell. Brother Lustig hesitated briefly at the gate but, driven by curiosity and bravery, knocked on the door. The gatekeeper, who peered out from behind the door, was a ghastly and frightening figure, but upon recognizing Brother Lustig, he became terrified. The gatekeeper stammered, "Why have you come here?" The reason for the gatekeeper's alarm was that he was the 9th demon who had escaped from Brother Lustig's backpack. This demon had warned the others in hell about Lustig's threats and had a vivid memory of the torment he suffered inside the backpack. Rushing to inform the king of hell, the demon exclaimed, "The man with the backpack is at the door, wanting to enter. But if you value your lives, do not let him in. He once tormented me terribly with his magic backpack." The king of hell and the other demons were shocked by this revelation. They quickly decided to act to protect themselves. The king commanded that the gate to hell be sealed and ordered all demons to prevent Brother Lustig from entering, shouting at him to go back, fearing he might wish to trap the entire realm of hell in his backpack. Outside, Brother Lustig heard the sudden shout, "Go back! Do not bring your backpack of horrors here!" Standing at the gates of hell, rejected, Brother Lustig pondered deeply. "If they do not want me here," he thought to himself, "then I must seek a place in heaven, there must be somewhere for me." With his decision firm, he turned away from the hellish gates and prepared to seek his fate elsewhere, hoping to find acceptance in heaven. After a long journey filled with many challenges, Brother Lustig finally reached the gates of heaven. Weighed down by his experiences yet hopeful, he stood before the gates and knocked gently. The gate opened, and St. Peter was there to greet him. Brother Lustig explained his journey and the incident at the gates of hell. Heaven is a place for those prepared in heart and spirit. While your journey has brought you wisdom and experience, entering heaven requires more. Reflect on whether your heart has truly found peace and if you have reached spiritual maturity. Listening to St. Peter, Brother Lustig fell silent for a moment. After a long journey and many trials, he now stood before the gates of heaven, but realized that his path was still not easy. "It's good to see an old friend here," he thought to himself as he looked at St. Peter, a sense of relief washing over his face. However, St. Peter's response was not what Brother Lustig had hoped for. "It is hard to believe you wish to enter heaven," St. Peter said cautiously, his voice mixing pity with sincerity. "Brother, please let me in. I must enter somewhere. If hell had accepted me, I wouldn't have come here," Brother Lustig pleaded desperately. His words carried the weight of a weary and exhausted journey. St. Peter sighed deeply. "No," he said gently but firmly. "You cannot enter." His words were final, reflecting a profound understanding of Brother Lustig's fate and the grave responsibility of reflecting God's will. Determination set on Brother Lustig's face. When St. Peter refused him entry to heaven, he made his last choice. "If you won't let me in, then I will return your backpack. I desire nothing from it," he declared. "Bring it here then," responded St. Peter, his voice soft and empathetic. Brother Lustig walked up to the gates of heaven with the backpack. He carefully passed it through the bars, and St. Peter took it and placed it beside him. At that moment, Brother Lustig took a deep breath and made his final request. "And now, I wish to enter my backpack." No sooner had he finished speaking than he seamlessly merged into the backpack. This act surprised St. Peter and the other heavenly beings. Thus, Brother Lustig became a part of heaven in his own unique way. you.